Is Caitlin Clark's injury a bump in the road for the WNBA? Plus, is an MLS club next for Cristiano Ronaldo? Hey everyone, and welcome to Front Office Sports Today from FOS Studios here in New York City. I'm Baker Machado.
And I'm Renee Washington. Hope you guys enjoyed your Memorial Day weekends, and thanks so much for joining us each and every weekday as we're chatting the biggest stories happening around the business and culture of sports. We've got also Clint Dempsey, one of the greatest U.S. men's national team soccer players, joining us on the show later as well. But first, let's dive right into the shoot-around.
Yes, indeed. And let's start with the mega ratings, Renee, coming from the Indy 500 over the weekend, as over 7 million people tuned in to watch Spaniard Alex Palou win that race, making it the most watched motorsport event in the U.S. since 2023 and the most watched Indy 500 since 2008, when 7.2 million people watched that race.
An
Renee.
Incredible 40% year-over-year increase. The first broadcast on Fox Sports, and what a rollout they had when you saw 300,000 people able to watch through streaming platforms, in addition to that 7.05 million, but also at the peak, 8.4 million viewers were tuned in as Alex Palou was finishing up the race and winning. And it's just remarkable. There were no blackouts. It was fun. Tom Brady got in on the heckling for Colts fans, and a tremendous improvement when you already saw them coming in with a 15% increase in the previous series to continue that this past weekend.
Meanwhile, just hours after scoring a goal in the last game of the Saudi Pro League season, Cristiano Ronaldo posted on X to say his chapter at Al Nassr might be over, saying, quote, "This chapter is over. The story still being written. Thanks to all." Now, Ronaldo's current contract is set to expire in June, and speculation, Renee, is he could sign with an unnamed Brazilian club, which would allow him to play in the FIFA Club World Cup. But there's also a lot of chatter. Maybe this is the time that he finally joins the MLS.
Cue Natasha Bedingfield. The rest is still unwritten. Because honestly, we heard last week FIFA president Gianni Infantino actually was telling, of all people, YouTuber and streamer I Show Speed, how Ronaldo might be looking to get with one of those Brazilian clubs or a club in general for the Club World Cup, in mid-June. Now, interesting, there are allegedly reports that one of the four clubs out of Brazil has offered Ronaldo an enticing offer, so he would have an opportunity. But the MLS is lurking. I mean, with Messi now in the league, anything is possible. Neymar, Ronaldo, you name it. If they could acquire whoever acquires that 5-time FIFA World Player, the Ronaldo, it's going to be expensive, but he's in still a great spot of his career. That would be a fantastic addition for any league.
And look, I think there's a conversation to be had of a lot of these guys who are going to these Saudi teams. Ronaldo, you mentioned Neymar. They go for a couple of years, get tons and tons of money, but then end up going to another league right after that.
And his contract is up in June. So it's with the contract expiring, the next chapter is there waiting.
Well, speaking of the next chapter, after 23 years of airing Around the Horn at 5 p.m., ESPN plans to replace that show with a 30-minute SportsCenter, this one anchored by Matt Berry and Christine Williamson. Now, it's unclear how long SportsCenter will air in that 5 p.m. time slot, but reports say that ESPN is thinking of a new show, maybe with talent like Peter Schrager, who they just signed, potentially filling in that slot. It's just crazy to think of 5 p.m. right before, pardon the interruption, now open because of Around the Horn's departure.
Shout out to our own Ryan Glasspeagle for this exclusive as well, because there were also reports that originally ESPN was trying to have Shannon Sharp host the show in that time, but of course there's been some legal issues there, lawsuits that are happening around the sexual assault allegations, so he's off the table. Also, they tried to negotiate with Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon to try to extend part of the interruption, but it seems like this has been their first step, and as you mentioned, we don't know how long, but it is at least short-term an option for Christine and for Mike to have a chance to host this.
Yeah, and by the way, they are still, for Matt Berry and Christine Williamson, they are still going to be doing the 2 p.m. SportsCenter in addition to this 5 o'clock one. All right, big WNBA news as the Indiana Fever say Caitlin Clark will miss a minimum of 2 weeks. This due to a left quadricep injury that she's got. Now, she has yet to miss an entire regular season game in her professional career, and she played every single game during her 4 years over at Iowa. So with ratings and attendance on the rise, could a few games without Caitlin Clark be a speed bump early in this WNBA season? Let's chat more about this in our main event. All right, so let's talk about the games exactly that she's going to be missing over these next 2 weeks. 4 of them happening over the course of the next couple of weeks. 2 of them against the Washington Mystics, 1 against the Chicago Sky. I'm more fascinated by the fact that 2 of these games had to be moved because fans were so excited about Caitlin Clark's attendance that they had to be moved to larger arenas. There's no word on if fans are going to be reimbursed for those games, but either way, these are pretty big games for her to miss.
And a big deal. It's got fans nervous for a number of reasons. One, it has been reported that the quad injury is actually different than the injury that had her miss the preseason game versus the Brazilian women's national team. It also, as you mentioned, is the first time she's ever missed a game since her sophomore year of high school.
Crazy.
So nobody could have predicted this would have happened. Now, a quad injury is not something to worry about. It's typically 2 weeks. It's more proactive than anything because you don't want it to get worse. And so for the Fever, they want to make sure they're taking this opportunity to minimize it, to nip in the bud now. And I know something that their head coach, Stephanie White, did also mention is it does give them an opportunity with other new additions like Sydney Colson, Natasha Howard, Dwana Bonner, along with, someone like Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston to see what they can do basketball-wise. But she had a good comment. It's also a chance for the team and for Caitlin to get a different perspective. But I think the same goes for the WNBA. We get a different perspective without Caitlin Clark on the court, of how the impact is for the WNBA. Do they still continue with the same numbers, or is there a drop-off, especially with the historic numbers she brought last season across the landscape?
Well, and even not just ratings. We know that, by the way, all of these 4 games that she's missing were going to be nationally televised games. So the ratings obviously will be impacted here because nobody's going to be tuning in to watch because she's not going to be on, unless you're like a very big Fever fan. On top of all that, maybe the attendance. Are we going to see those drop, given the fact that not only are the Indiana Fever leading in attendance, they have 50% more than the second place the team that's out there in terms of attendance because everybody's traveling to see them. And by the way, the 4th highest prices also. So if you're going to one of these Fever games, are you feeling okay paying all this extra money to see a player that's not going to be playing? It's similar to what we see in the NBA when, let's say, Steph Curry or LeBron get injured and you don't see them and you live in Charlotte or New Orleans, and this is your one opportunity to see them.
But I think this is also an opportunity for the league to show they are more than just Caitlin Clark. And listen, I love Caitlin's game. She brings so much to the league and was a big reason why last year we saw across the entire WNBA landscape the most watched regular season in 24 years, the highest attendance in 22 years, everything from revenue, ticket prices, merchandise, even social media was a massive bump from the previous season. Caitlin Clark undoubtedly was a big part of that. But you cannot have any league, any sport have to only ride on one player. And for the WNBA, they've been building so many personalities, faces, connecting with their audience in a meaningful way. I think these 2 weeks, could be 3 weeks, so maybe 4 to 6 games that she misses is an opportunity for the Fever to show what they can do without her, but for the league to show these numbers are because of Caitlin and everyone. I know that's something that they've talked so much about, that there's been a big effort across the board for them to increase their overall excitement, buzz, and fandom. And we saw this last year, Baker, with the postseason. When the Fever were eliminated, the playoff numbers dipped a little bit below that average 1 million, but they were still very high. So if you can get kind of around that same rough area of viewership attendance, despite Caitlin being out, I think it goes a long way for just the belief in this league.
I think you're so spot on with this because you can't just be one person. And by the way, we know there's a million, from Nafisa Collier to Ionescu to so many amazing stars that are on this in this league that they easily will be able to, supplant whatever they've been missing with her. But it's going to be interesting for the WNBA for 4 games not to have Caitlin as sort of the talk of those games, because especially that game against the Sky, that last game that she's going to be missing, that's a rivalry that the WNBA has been trying to build, albeit the first game didn't go, I think, as planned as I think a lot of people wanted to, based on the racial slurs that were thrown at Angel Reese during that game. But they're trying to build a rivalry, and it's hard to build a rivalry when one of the stars is not on the court when that game is happening. But I'm with you, though.
And that's a big part that's disappointing. On the basketball side, you're not going to get to see that matchup again, but you'll get to see them again future times because they do, of course, play multiple times throughout the season. But it is remarkable, since last season, the best viewed games were all involving the Fever. And even so far this season, it was that Fever Sky game. Now, a game like the Aces going up against the Liberty also had the second highest rating. There are other stars, as you mentioned, Asia Wilson and Jonquel Jones, other names that people are really locked into watching. And now it's time for the WNBA to put that on full display without Caitlin Clark on the court.
I love that. All right, coming up, guys, we're going to talk a little bit of soccer. The U.S. men's national team not off to the hottest start with their new manager right now in preparation for the 2026 World Cup. So coming up, U.S. men's national team hero Clint Dempsey going to join me and Renee, going to chat his expectations for the men's team ahead of the World Cup next year. That's up on Front Office Sports Today right after this. Welcome back, everyone, to Front Office Sports today. Now, there's a lot of pressure on the U.S. men's national team ahead of the 2026 World Cup here in the United States. No better person to ask about those expectations than former star Clint Dempsey. He joined Renee and I earlier to talk about it. Take a look. One of the greatest legends in American soccer, Clint Dempsey, joining us from Charlotte, North Carolina. Clint, great to have you here. How you doing?
Doing great. Great to be here. Appreciate that intro. You made me sound good.
Well, of course, you are very good, Clint.
Absolutely.
We have a lot, obviously, to get to. But before we dive into the World Cup and so many other questions, let's talk about your partnership that you got going on right now with American Airlines.
Yeah, I mean, anything that grows the game in the States, especially in my home state of Texas, I'm glad to be a part of that. I mean, American Airlines is the official sponsor of FIFA. They're flying people from Canada, Mexico, the U.S. to 16 different host cities, and giving people the opportunity to win free tickets to World Cup games. So excited to be around stuff like that.
Yes, and Clint, with the 2026 World Cup expanding to 48 teams, we've also heard conversation about the 2030 World Cup expanding to as many as 64 teams. Oof. And some have been against it. I know CONCACAF President Victor Montagliani has been against it. I'm curious your thoughts on whether or not the World Cup should continue to expand to as many as 64 teams.
I don't know. If I'm being honest with you, I like less teams being in there. I like quality over quantity. There's something special about playing in a World Cup and having to earn it, right? But whatever they decide, they decide. I don't make those decisions. But that's what was special for me growing up, was to aspire to play in a World Cup, to represent your country, and to feel like it was something that was truly special. And the cool thing about it, you know, being in one country, was that you got to learn about that culture, and you got to everybody's experiencing the same thing at the same time, no matter where you're from, if you're in that country. So I think you lose a little bit of that, but at the same time, you know, who am I to say what's the best thing to do? There's people that make those decisions, but that's just kind of my 2 cents.
Clint, we know you've played in so many different leagues, from MLS, the national league, the national team, and of course internationally as well. And we know MLS has sort of been talking a lot about changing the structure of their schedule to align more with the international leagues, especially when it comes to the transfer portal and others. What's your take on that? Do you like the MLS maybe looking at that route to sort of be on the same page with the international clubs?
Yeah, I think it's cool, but I think it's also difficult, right? Because of the locations of some of these MLS cities, and trying to play through the winter months of December and January in places like Minnesota and Montreal, and where you're going to get brain freeze running outside unless it's an enclosed stadium. And also what you deal with some of the MLS teams that, you know, share stadiums with NFL teams, right? And it's the big balance of getting on the same schedule, that you're not interfering with one or the other. And then, like you said, the transfer windows, because it kind of makes things complicated. So anything that changes the game to kind of get things more synchronized and to have, you know, more in line with Europe, I think ends up being a better thing, and it kind of makes it easier to make those type of moves and to do business.
Yeah, and for you, Clint, as someone that has pioneered and had success on the international as well as the American side of soccer, of course, being the first U.S. men's national team player to score in 3 different World Cups, to be one that still sits at the top of scoring across U.S. men's soccer, you've had the opportunity to play in so many different arenas, and I'm curious your thoughts on what you feel the MLS needs to do. Trying to compete with the global transfer market is one step that they're looking to do. What does the MLS truly need to do to be that landing spot instead of a stepping stone for men's soccer players to compete with the rest of the world?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would like to see more soccer-specific stadiums that are natural grass instead of turf. I think during my time, especially in the end, the last 5 years playing in Seattle with the Sounders, I think that turf just kind of beats up your body. I think the owners aren't going to want to hear this, but I think getting rid of the salary cap and allowing to be, you know, a little bit more flexible there, even though that they made a lot of changes. I'm just curious what will happen in 2026, right? Like, how will that affect MLS and grow it even more so? Because you think about 94, it brought about the MLS. What could a big World Cup in North America, especially on U.S. soil, bring about after 2026 from a strong showing?
Clint. Yeah, Clint.
Well, another question on that, just quickly want to get your thoughts, Clint, because as the league is trying to grow, we're also seeing the growth of the American talent pool. DPs and the highest paid players that are making north of $1 million in the MLS, a lot of them are international players, Messi being one of them, but many other names that you can look at the MLS, Busquets and others. What do you feel is the difference, and why for the American side of men's soccer, they have been having that gap in having the top talent coming out of American soccer that's deserving of those top salaries?
Yeah, I mean, you see that there are some players that are American that are DPs. You know, when I came back from Tottenham, I was one of those players, and at the time being the highest DP being paid and being an American player that was making that type of salary. But I think it's one of those things where it's good to have both, right? Players that are doing really well in the States and getting to the level of being a DP here, but also you need state players that are in Europe that are playing against the best players week in and week out. And for me, I got to experience the chance to do both of those, right? Like if it wasn't for MLS, then I don't break into the national team as early as I did. And if I don't play with the national team and do well in 2006, scoring in the World Cup, I don't get to go to Europe. And then if I don't go to Europe, I can't test myself against the best players week in and week out and then come back to the national team and perform at a high level. And then without all that, being able to then come back and to hopefully inspire American players to be a DP for their team and to be a guy that's counted on to help the team win and have that pressure on his shoulders. So hopefully, I paved the way a little bit, but at the same time, I owe a lot of respect and a lot of appreciation to MLS, who gave me my chance to get the foot in the door.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're all excited about what's coming up in 2026 with the World Cup coming up soon, and of course, the continued growth of soccer in this country. Clint Dempsey, thank you so very much for joining us here over at Front Office Sports.
Nah, thanks y'all. Y'all had some tough questions. I appreciate it.
Put them through the grill.
I know. Listen, if you win 3 CONCACAF Gold Cups, you can handle some tough questions, Clint. But we appreciate
there
you.
There we go. You know your stuff. Appreciate y'all.
And a special thanks to Clint Dempsey. And coming up next on Front Office Sports today, Tom Brady getting back into crypto. We'll talk about that next. And welcome back, everyone, to Front Office Sports Today with Renee Washington. I'm Baker Machado, and Tom Brady sure does love crypto, as he's part of a group of investors putting in $18 million in an AI fintech startup. So for more on this, let's bring in our editor-in-chief, Dan Roberts, who's been following this. So Dan, tell us a little bit about this group of investors that Brady's a part of and this company specifically.
Yeah, well, this company, Catena Labs, is out of Boston. Now, maybe it's the Boston connection more than anything else, but he does like crypto. Catena Labs wants to build the first AI-native financial institution. What does that mean? A number of things. In fact, it's really more of an AI play than a crypto play, but it uses blockchain on the back end. And the co-founder is Sean Neville, who is the co-founder of another big Boston-based crypto company, Circle. And Circle is very big in the crypto world. It's behind USDC stablecoin. So Catena Labs, it involves shopping and e-commerce. They say that AI agents are ready to do a lot of great things, but legacy financial institutions don't yet have the logistics to prepare to use AI in the right way. So it's AI, it's crypto, it's commerce, it's legacy financial, and Brady is just one of many investors in this $18 million round. Of course, it's interesting because of Brady's own history with backing and loudly promoting other crypto plays. Am I right?
Well, it is interesting because Tom Brady's everywhere, guys. I mean, he's involved in team ownership. He's just released a new museum. He's involved in trading cards. He's doing a lot. And in the crypto space specifically, he's no stranger to this space. And we do know in the past, he was one of many very prominent investors of FTX. But that did not play out so well. What makes this go around different? I mean, you were following this closely from the jump.
Well, first of all, you're totally right that he's got his hands in a lot of different investments in his post-playing career. He's really become an angel investor, you know? And I think that when you have Brady's imprimatur on something, it can really make a brand, you know? Suddenly it's like, oh, Tom Brady's backing this. So is that great for Katina? Sure, maybe. Again, Katina, not yet really a known name, but it's got some power players. Coinbase Ventures was also in the round. Some other big crypto names there. That's why it feels like a crypto story as well as an AI story. Is this time different? Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's nowhere near the scale of FTX. But guys, I was at the FTX Crypto Bahamas conference in May of the same year that 6 months later, the company went up in flames. Of course, many people by now, even if you don't know crypto, know the story. Sam Bankman-Fried, the whiz kid nerd behind the company, he's now in prison with a sentence of 25 years, funneling customer funds from FTX to his other businesses. Brady and Gisele Bundchen, his then wife, were some of the most prominent celebrity backers of FTX. At that conference in the Bahamas, they flew in, landed. I was in the green room about to host a different panel. They were shuttled straight to the stage to give their talks. And, Gisele was in these ads. She was the FTX environmental ambassador. And we know it blew up in their faces because they, along with many other pro athletes, Shaq, Serena, Naomi Osaka, Shohei Ohtani, were in a huge class action lawsuit for promoting FTX, which of course FTX turned out to be a fraud. Was it their fault? Should they have known? Most of the charges have now been dropped. But I am surprised to see Brady so quickly put his money into a crypto.
Yeah, and we saw him made fun of a lot during that roast on Netflix for this as well. We have about 40 seconds, Dan. We know 18 million is the amount that they've raised, but do we know how much Brady actually contributed to this?
Don't know. I will use our 40 seconds to say this, though. This Brady thing is just one part of a larger trend, and that is crypto and sports are back together. I mean, FTX had its name on the Miami Heat arena and had to be removed. It was a huge meltdown. Now already, you're seeing crypto sponsorships back in sports, including especially in the NBA and in the Premier League.
And Coinbase, by the way, now on the S&P 500, so obviously continuing to grow there. Dan Roberts, our editor-in-chief. Thank you so much, Dan. Guys, let's go see what's bubbling over at the FOS water cooler. We told you earlier about Spaniard Alex Palou finishing first at the Indy 500 this weekend, but Connor Daly also went number one. After finishing 8th this weekend, Daly admitted at a victory banquet that he drove the entire race sitting, quote, in his own pee. After rain delayed the start of the race by about 45 minutes. Listen to what he said at the banquet.
Never in my life have I urinated in my race car until Sunday. I was sitting on the grid and I was like, this is the best car I've ever been in my whole life. Like I'm gonna have to pee in this thing. I kid you not.
Oh my God.
I legitimately urinated in my race car before the race even started.
Now, it does sound a little disgusting, Renee, but I doubt he's the first race car driver that has ever peed on himself in a race.
Yeah, I think there's probably a high percentage or percentage of drivers that have peed themselves.
Boom.
And I like all the headlines and posts that I've seen on social media. A need for peed. Listen, a rain delay on top of having to go to the bathroom is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, we
and
know.
I have to imagine, I mean, you have to think about with the heat in the cars, all the different conditions, the speed around the track, in all seriousness, that this probably does happen pretty often. But I love that he was so candid and just was like, listen, I drove the entire race sitting in my own pee, and I'm not the least bit not the least bit worried about it.
So shout out to his pit crew, clean up on aisle 7 in that car, by the way. Guys, coming up on the show tomorrow, Alex Palou, who we were talking about earlier, going to be joining us. We'll see you tomorrow for more Front Office Sports Today. Bye. Ooh, gotta pee. I gotta pee.